Welcome to the Born Unbreakable podcast. I'm your host, Coach Des, mindset motivator and lifestyle entrepreneur. From loss, trauma, disappointments, and devastation to healing, hope, and betterment, what has grounded me is my unbreakable spirit. We all have that spirit within us. Every week, I'm here to inspire you with stories of perseverance and growth. My mission is to help you crush self-limiting beliefs and to be unapologetically you. You are your only limit, so take action today. Let your unbreakable ride begin now. This episode is brought to you by Blue Skies Life, a lifestyle brand with high-quality, ethical, and sustainable products. There are products for your mind, body, and home, everything from calming tea and luxurious shea butter to Turkish towels and silk kimonos. The holiday season is upon us, so start getting these one-of-a-kind gifts now. Go to blueskieslife.com, that's BLUSKYSLIFE.com, and use code BU20 to get 20% off your order today. Welcome to the Born Unbreakable podcast. I am so excited for another day and this amazing interaction that I'm about to have with my guest today, Amie Dean. So let me tell you a little bit about Amie, and then I am ecstatic about getting into today's content. So Amie is a licensed holistic therapist, an ascension coach, a healer, and a mindfulness teacher. And she helps others on their journey to helping to heal their inner wounds, which is something that we all have in different ways. And I think it's important for us to address that. And the goal really, once she helps them do that, is so that they can live their expansive and most joyful lives possible. And she's gone through her own journey of awakening. And so I would love to be able to start there, Amie. Tell us about you and your journey and what led you into this space.
Yes, it's an excellent question. Thank you so much for having me. And, it's always a little hard to start off because I realize that on some level I've grown up, very, empathic, very highly sensitive. And so I've always been really connected to spirituality and figuring out what that means for me, although it's shifted, of course, over the years. But I grew up in a mostly Christian home and, was told I need to go to church. I need to get confirmed in the Lutheran church, and was told I had to, take this next step for myself to understand who I really was. And it fit for me for a little while. And then as I grew up, I realized it wasn't quite for me anymore. My mom wasn't so happy about that, but over time, she has definitely turned around. And I discovered through that what was kind of calling to me, I'll say. My soul was calling to me. It was in my late teens, and I was feeling really, really just down around a relationship that had ended, and a lot of shifts were happening in my life. And I thought, you know what? I just want to explore something more deeply. I want to understand who I am more deeply. And, the religion I was brought up in is not giving that to me right now. I wasn't feeling like I was truly being understood and seen in the way that I'd wanted to. And so I went on a little inner journey, so to speak, and I tried meditation. I was kind of dabbling in a few things here and there. Right. And trying to figure out what does this all mean and what's happening for me. And as I opened my mind, at first I was a little scared, right? Because here I am trying yoga and meditation, and it was a little off-centering for me at first. I knew this was right for me, but I knew that other people in my life wouldn't understand. Right. Especially my mom and some friends and there was a huge, huge shift. So from there, everything just took hold. And I had this incredible awakening experience as, a few years into my journey. And what happened was not, necessarily blissful at first because I had a lot of trauma that I had to deal with. And so, for example, I had some medical, concerns and some chronic problems that I was dealing with, and ended up in the hospital for a couple weeks. I was unable to get down food. I was unable to eat anything, other than liquid at that point. And it was weeks and weeks and weeks that I was in the hospital. They didn't know what was wrong, and there was a lot of inflammation. And I thought I might die. I was terrified. I thought I might die. I didn't know what was happening. I didn't know what to think. I was just so afraid at that point. And I thought, you know what? I got to, try to keep it together, try to, build this resilience from here. And I thought, this is, I'm going to look back on this one day and I'm going to grow from this. So I stood strong in that. And I said, I'm going to keep going. And through that, it was a very long recovery process for me. I lost a lot of weight and, a good almost 20 pounds in the hospital. And, I've also been a smaller person. So that was not a good thing for me. And as time went on, I realized I needed to take better care of myself. So I changed my diet entirely. I, sought out, a therapist. I sought out a coach. I sought out people that could help me get back on track. And from there, I said to myself, one day, this was actually when I was in the hospital, I said, I just can't take anymore. I said, I just can't handle anymore. And I caught myself in that moment. It was this kind of moment of discovery of, wait a second. No, that's not true. That's actually not true. I can handle so much more. And I'm strong enough to get through this. And it took a moment, to really get to that place. But I did, and I moved through it. And what I discovered through this, and this was actually a time where my dad had passed away suddenly in a couple-year period, right? I had this chronic medical issue. I lost my dad, who was also my best friend. And I had this, real like truth coming experience of what is happening inside me. What is, what do I need to uncover? What do I need to understand about who I am? And at first, it was very painful. I had to sit with some really hard stuff. I had to sit with my own inner child wounds and my fears of loss and death and grief. And from there, I started having, oh my gosh, these incredible, I don't even know how to describe them on some level, these incredible experiences where I felt bliss out of nowhere. I started feeling unified with everyone around me. I would just be sitting in a coffee shop, listening to the music and sipping on tea, and all of a sudden just feel like tears were coming to my eyes, like of joy, and not knowing where they were coming from and not caring what other people thought in that moment. And it was just an incredible experience of knowing we're all one, right? I just felt it. And I had to sit with the pain first, right? I had to go through this dark night of the soul, so to speak, right? With my losses, my loss of my identity through the medical traumas I went through, and the loss of my dad, in just a couple year time frame. So it was a lot to sit with, but what came from it was joy. It was like that was underneath the surface the whole time. And I just had to take this, I just had to be brave, really, be courageous to go inward to discover that was already there.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Going inward
Yes.
is such a process.
It is.
It's the funny thing about just saying that out loud is like we think the outside world, I'm looking like at the window as if everybody can see what I'm looking at. We think the outside world is scary.
Right.
Going in is scary. There's a
Yes.
lot going on in there.
Yes. Oh my
And
gosh.
so
Yes.
one of the observations I have that I want to ask you about is I believe that everybody has had different traumas. Maybe the degree of those
Yeah.
traumas is a little bit different,
Exactly.
some are big, maybe small, but through childhood, maybe there's things that we've seen, things that we've experienced that have affected us in a particular way, and we've been hurt or we've been felt damaged or broken or maybe even less than,
Yes.
because of circumstances that are in our environment.
Mm-hmm.
Then I see sometimes
Yeah.
the behavior of, I'm just going to forget about that. I don't need to talk about it. It's fine. I'm going to move on. It's,
Right.
I'm good. This is where I am now.
Yes.
But when I've seen, and I'm thinking of it recently because a friend I had this conversation with a friend yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
When that approach is taken,
Right.
all of those pasts manifest themselves forward in a way that there's a blockage
Yes.
because the channel has not been, that canal of healing hasn't quite progressed. It's clear that there's work to be done, some of that inner exploration. So
Yes.
what what do you suggest when someone is at that
Mhm.
point when they are at a avoidance? I mean, I guess you could say where it's there. It's not that they're
Yeah.
in denial that these things are there, but
Yeah.
they're avoiding addressing them. Like,
Yes.
how do they start to become vulnerable enough to acknowledge them
Mhm.
and then decide how to begin
Mhm.
exploring them so they can heal?
Oh my gosh, such a great question. And honestly, this is something that I really feel very, close to as I think about this, because as a therapist and as a coach, this is what I see every day. I see avoidance, and I also see it as a positive thing in some ways. So I'll kind of go into what that looks like, and then of course a little deeper into how to work through it. But
Mhm.
avoidance is really, it's just our protective mechanisms. It's our defensive mechanisms coming up. And when you've been through trauma, small trauma or big trauma, you're going to have protective mechanisms. And it's really important you have them, because on some level, right, life has been kind of moving through this, or kind of throwing curveballs at you, so to speak, right? And having you reset your nervous system, and you're trying to get back on track. So of course you're going to avoid things because your window of tolerance is low, and there's not much you're going to be able to take in at that moment without offsetting your nervous system in a way that might feel damaging for many people. So there's that. And I think on a very, very important level, it's just necessary to say, okay, it's okay you have these defenses, because I think there's shame first, right, about someone who is avoiding, and they know they're avoiding, right, and they're very clear about their avoidance, but they are so afraid of going inward, as you had mentioned, right, because it is a journey and it is difficult, and therefore there's shame. Often there's guilt around, wait a second, if I do this, I'm going to hurt, but now I feel bad about not being able to do this. So I think the first step truly is compassion, right? Compassion for ourselves and giving ourselves grace in the moment, right? Because if we can't give ourselves grace in the moment, or at least, seek a professional who can give us that grace if we're unable to do so for ourselves just yet, that's so important, because we cannot heal. We can't go from avoidance, right, to open-hearted discovery. There's definitely some steps in between, right? And so a lot of the work I do is really holding the space for clients to be in what they're in. So if they're in an avoidant state, then we move towards compassion around being in an avoidant state, right? If that makes sense. And it's okay for that to be the case. And so there isn't a pressure, there isn't a push, right, to make things happen. It's more of a gentle guidance towards, this is what life could look like if we move in this direction, but let's take it slow, right? So it's not so offsetting for your nervous system and too much for you to handle, so that your body totally shuts down, right, at some point. So yeah, it's definitely a process, but it's all about meeting the person where they're at, right? And we have to meet ourselves where we're at first and foremost. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's why I love that word awakening,
Yes.
because it's almost like with each step, that's the feeling that you get, is you're a little bit more awake to yourself, what
Yeah.
you're feeling, and then getting to a place where you're actually ready to talk about what you're feeling.
Yes.
Because it takes a while to process things,
Mhm.
right? In a way that you feel you understand yourself, let alone thinking, okay, now I'm going to try to have someone else understand me too.
That's a
Like,
challenge. Yes.
right. Yeah. Because in some
Yeah.
way too, I think is like
Mhm.
I don't know if I would say denial, but it's almost
Mhm.
like maybe a little bit of disbelief of
Mhm.
some things that you've gone through, and having to get to a place of acceptance
Yeah.
um,
Oh, yeah.
is a
Absolutely.
part of it, right?
Yeah.
Because I think that there is this thing that happens where um, between resistance and acceptance, because sometimes we resist the things that we just don't want or wish didn't happen, but it isn't until you get to acceptance that you can make peace and then make sense of what it is
Yeah.
that you're wanting to do from here.
Yes.
But the timing of that, it's not overnight where you're like, okay, great, I've processed through that.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
Now.
That's such a good point, quite honestly. And, I will tell you, I do have clients, they'll come to me and they'll say, all right, I'm tired of this, right? So on one hand, I do a lot of work with clients where we uncover their subpersonalities, which is understanding that we have fragmentation, right? As a result of our trauma. And therefore, not just because of trauma, we all have fragmentation, right? There's a part of us that feels one way, a part of us that feels another way, right? Which makes it hard to make decisions sometimes, or to be in the world in the way that we want to, as as connected to our highest self. And so these parts of us are, well, they're guides on the journey to help us understand what needs to be healed, right? So these different parts of my clients will come to session, and I'll have one client say, oh, I'm ready, let's do this, like I'm ready to do this. And another part is 100% in avoidance about it. And this is why they've been stuck right up until this point. And I can understand their frustration. And then another part of them would come up and say, well, I want to feel better already. And then that part of them that wants to feel better is actually keeping them stuck in the not feeling better, if that makes sense, right? And I know it can be like layers of just peeling back and peeling back. And so, the recipe for that really is just to be present, right? And that's what I do. I'm present with my clients. I make space for whatever's arising. And then just reminding them of their power, right, through this, because often it can feel like these parts are taking over, right? And we're stuck and we have no sense of what we're supposed to be doing or how we're supposed to be moving forward. And my clients can get stuck in their stuckness, if that makes sense, right? I know we all can get stuck in our stuckness sometimes, right? Oh. It's like, I'm so stuck. And then we just keep repeating that. Oh my gosh. Yeah, right?
That's the thing about it. It's like feeling stuck is tiring.
Oh my gosh.
Then after you take a nap, it's still there. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, you're there still. I thought when I woke up you would decide to do something else, but you're there. I guess I have to deal with you.
Yeah, exactly. Nothing will make it go away, right? In that way, not a movie, not, just going for a walk. It's, I know it's really challenging. Yeah.
So that brings me to one of my next questions, which is, what are examples of things that we can do to transcend our negative thoughts and create some patterns that help us to explore our feelings and, what we need to work on?
Yes, absolutely. So I want to share a couple things. One is that there's a process that I use typically with clients. It's something that I've discovered over time has been really helpful. It's very simple. But before I go into this, it's like a 3-step process here. The first thing to note is that when we are awakening spiritually, right, which is really, quite honestly, just coming back home to ourselves, it's already who we are. Right? It's not this big event necessarily that has to take place in our lives, right? So there's that piece I want to mention. And then to get there, to awaken spiritually, to heal our trauma, which is all the same thing, right? Awakening spiritually, we are healing our trauma. And from there, that's when we're able to get in touch with the truth of who we really are deep down. So when I look at the steps, and the first thing to do is self-awareness. First and foremost is self-awareness, because, right, and again, this is coming back to what you had mentioned earlier, right? I know I'm in avoidance. I don't want to go there. This feels uncomfortable. So I'm going to do something else instead, or I'm going to plan social media, or I'm going to call a friend and talk about something that happened yesterday, and just whatever it is, right? To get rid of what is happening. So that's just, the first thing to note is we have to come back to self-awareness. We have to name it, right? We have to be honest with ourselves first and foremost. If not anybody else, we have to be honest first, right, with ourselves. And that is that we're avoiding. That's the first step towards healing, right? Is to say that's what's been happening, right? Or if there's this framework for it, we can say there's a part of me that's been in avoidance, and there's a part of me that doesn't want to avoid anymore. Right? So we get a really clear sense of our inner worlds, right? And what's really happening in there. And then from there, it's about tracking our patterns, right? And tracking and noticing what's coming up. Yes, in a very important way. Yes. I know. This is now
there's data to back everything up.
Yes. exactly. It's like, oh no, people could see this, right? Or yeah, this is coming down to this sense of, yeah, vulnerability. Now we're bringing in vulnerability, right? And saying, I'm going to be vulnerable with myself and see what that feels like. And the worst thing that could happen, right, is that it activates our inner child wounds of shame, right? Which is the worst thing that could happen, right? And so we have to acknowledge that that could arise as we're doing this tracking and as we're opening to that, which is why having somebody on our side, whether it's a really trusted friend or a therapist or a coach or somebody, right, that really connects with us, is so important. Because we need a witness for our journey, right? A witness to say, it's okay. It's okay to go through what you're going through right now. And I love you anyway through it. Right. So that's the big challenge. Yeah.
That part of it, that part
Yeah.
of having a witness. I just think that
Yeah.
I know from what I've seen in clients, I know from what I see in myself, is
Mhm.
that first you bear witness to yourself.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And you're like, oh, yes, this is my life.
Hmm.
This is real. This is
Yeah.
who I am. This is what I've been through.
Yes.
And then you have that
Mhm.
person who's listening to you and telling you,
Right.
that's okay.
Yes.
That's okay that
Exactly.
you went through that.
Yeah.
Who
Oh,
you are. I mean, it's just that experience alone is
yeah.
so powerful.
It is. And you know what? That can just crush shame in that moment, right? I mean, it crushes it right there. And that inner critic, right, that's within us, that part shows up, right? Typically when we're just doing this on our own. And we're like, okay, I'm in avoidance. I'm going to track what's happening. I'm going to track my thoughts, maybe my behaviors, and track what's coming up for me. And yet,
Mm.
right, that inner critic might be really loud in your mind, right? The one saying,
Yeah.
what's wrong with you? Or why are you acting this way? Or you should know better. Or, those types of things. And having that person or having somebody or a community of people to say, you know what, you're not alone in this. Actually, I feel that way sometimes too. But I know that there's
Mhm.
nothing wrong with you and I love you anyway, kind of thing. Right. And that's so important. That in
Yeah.
itself can be healing for trauma and healing for our inner child wounds, right? Just to be seen, because that's what we
Yeah.
get typically, right? Is when we were younger, is to be seen in the way that we deserve to be seen, right?
Mhm.
Which is a challenge as human beings because of all of our fragmentation, right? That we
Yeah.
tend to grapple with.
Oh, that's true. What do you see
Mhm.
as ways that people track? So first they have the awareness
Yes.
and then the tracking piece. What
Mhm.
does that look like?
Yeah. So, what that typically looks like, first and foremost, is to get a sense of naming, right? What's coming up. So, for example, I'm in avoidance, or there's a part of me that's in avoidance, or there's a part of me that's scared right now to go inward and do this work. So, self awareness is really just simply sitting with whatever's arising and having the courage, right, to be honest with yourself in the moment. Now, mindfulness
Mhm.
meditation can be an excellent way of building more self awareness. So, for people who say, I'm stuck and I don't know why, and I don't know what's happening, then mindfulness meditation can bring to light more of the understanding, right, of what the body's telling you, what your mind is telling you, and why things are not in integration, right, at that point. So, that can be great just to sit with it and to meditate on it and to say, what is causing my stuckness, and just maybe sit in a mindfulness practice and allow whatever is to arise. Now, again, right,
Mhm.
this does take some level of courage and an openness, right, to go inward, but you could sit for 2 minutes, 3 minutes, right, just to allow whatever is to be there. And then from there, I do have a spiritual awakening guidebook. And in this, complimentary download, which, later, I can also provide that link. This download is great because it has a journal. And in this journal, you're able to track what's coming up and what are these mental emotional patterns are already laid out for you. So you don't have to think them up and just check them off as you're going through the day. And then at the very end of each day, giving yourself this, just unconditional compassion for what arose within you, because we can easily berate ourselves, right, if we're not careful and we're not coming back home to this understanding that we're doing the best we can, right, in any given moment.
Yeah. And it's interesting how, okay, like go back to childhood learning,
Yeah.
right? Like, or
Yeah.
any, especially adult learning too. You
Yeah.
have to go through this process of hearing something,
Yep.
seeing it,
Yep.
then doing it.
Mm-hmm.
It's how we learn. So I love what you're describing because I do think it's one step to sit and reflect and recognize
Mm-hmm.
and think and pause. And
Yeah.
then it's another step to actually write and
Mhm.
be able to see that back. And I think the power of data is that, let's say you do this for a week, just
Mhm.
as an example, hypothetically.
Yes.
You're starting to write this down
Mhm.
and you're, day 1 through 7, and you actually, at the end of that week, have
Mhm.
a reflection process where you see the
Yeah.
patterns.
Yeah.
Wow, these are, I see that over the course of these 7 days, this thing came up
Yeah.
5 times out of 7 or something, I mean,
Yes.
whatever that looks like. But
I
I
know.
do think there's power in that because until you
Yeah.
understand your
Mhm.
behaviors and your patterns, can you then determine
Mhm.
if there's something that you want to do to address them, to do
Yes.
some other action after you understand even
Mhm.
more closely what you're experiencing.
Oh my gosh. Yes, that's so right on point. And so without that, we don't know, right? We don't always know how to even move forward, right? I'll hear people say when they come to work with me, they'll say, I don't even know where to start. I have no idea where to start right now because there's so many things that are going on. And so from there, yes, I will give them a lot of tools to start tracking. And these are the kinds of tools I give them, which is to sit down, right? And to have your right. I love the idea of the data, right? You have the data, you can look back on it, you have a way of knowing, right, what is changing and what's not changing. And there are things that, the things that aren't changing. What are some of those obstacles? It gives you room to explore what may not have been working up until now. So it can be a very, very important process for spiritual awakening, but even just for healing our wounding and understanding, right, what's coming up for us. And I realize I mentioned there's a 3-step process too, right,
Yes.
for working through this. So I want to make sure that I, make that a point. So what that looks like, so maybe I'll pull this all together as you're exploring, as you're discovering what's coming up for you, you're naming it, right? You're moving into it, maybe just a little bit at a time, right? You have people who can witness this with you, maybe. That way you don't feel alone on the journey. You're
Mhm.
tracking everything, you're making notes as you go along, and it doesn't have to take a long time, by the way, right? It could take 10-15 minutes a day. I know we're all super busy, and so I know that can be a
Yeah,
really
people are like, how long does this take?
what are we doing
How long
here?
do things go?
Exactly. It's like, is this going to take me a few hours because I am out,
Yeah,
right? I
I
know.
can't. I'm out.
Exactly, right. So this is, yeah, it has to be easy. If it's not easy, we are going to avoid that too, right? That's just how our minds work as human beings. We are complex. Overwhelmed.
Overwhelmed.
Yes, exactly. When we're overwhelmed, what do? We are done, right? We are just, that's it, shut the door kind of thing. So with this, it's all about just a few minutes a day, right? 5 to 10 minutes, I would say anywhere if you have time. 20 to 30 minutes a day if that's possible, but just do what you can, just to write down what's coming up. And like I said, in that in my spiritual awakening guidebook, the journal's already there to do this work, so that's an opportunity. But also, with this process, I want to go into these next steps as you're tracking, as your self-aware awareness is growing around your patterning, what's happening for you. There are going to be triggers. There's already triggers, right, that are showing up, emotional triggers of other people in your life and work situations or whatnot. And so, it's important to have a process to work through these triggers while you're tracking and even before you're tracking. So I want to give that, if you're up for it, and we can practice it together if that works for you, and just see, how that feels.
My gosh.
Yeah.
Yes.
Let's let's make it happen. I love it. That's
Yeah.
great. Yeah.
I mean, it's just so important
Yes.
because I think these triggers happen and we're like, no, it's happening. I can't. I'm going to walk away now.
Exactly. I know, this is great. This is the theme of avoidance, right? Yeah, exactly. It's so easy to
I
walk
mean,
away.
here's the thing, like you said, it's not that
Yeah.
it's bad because
No.
you know what? Maybe
Yeah.
sometimes walking away is the thing
Yes.
at that time because that is
Yeah.
the tool that you have.
Right.
And it just,
Yes. It's
allows you
necessary.
to take some time.
Yeah.
But I think what we're trying to say here is that's
Mhm.
not the only tool that you have,
Exactly.
right? Like
Yes.
when you have a process or
Mhm.
you can tap into these things, these tools,
Right.
you can start to expand how
Yes.
you address these triggers.
Exactly.
Right?
Yes. That's perfectly said. That is it exactly. It's like we have coping mechanisms, right? And now we want to just kind of turn them into coping skills, so to speak, right? And just kind of turn it around
Skills.
a little bit.
That's
Yeah.
like when you go to school, right? They say, okay, we've taught you everything. You've been here these years. Now go forth and apply this skill, right? Isn't that what they teach us in
They do.
school? Like,
Like,
you're
go do
ready now,
this.
bird, fly.
Yes, exactly. And that's what it's like. Yes, because if the coping mechanisms were working, right, people wouldn't seek help. Right? They're like, okay, they're working, but they're not working. Right? They're kind of working, but they're also not kind of working. Right? Because maybe on one level it's still causing strain in a relationship, right? Or on some level there's still a lot of emotional pain coming up as a result of not being able to go inward, right? And really feel what's arising because it's too painful, right, to go there. And so with coping skills, and this process that I've developed, it's called Pathway Back to Love. And it's very easy. Anybody can do it. And it really just helps you get in touch with your highest self, right? Your core self, so to speak.
I
And
want that all the time, Amy.
I know.
I want to be on the path of love with myself all the time. Oh my gosh.
Yes.
Um,
The
but that,
goal. Yes.
right? I mean,
Yeah.
maybe I'm just saying it out loud, but I have this feeling that people are secretly saying that to me.
You're not alone in this. I think this is the heart of spiritual awakening, which is to be in love, right? Which is to be seated as our true self. And it sounds almost a little like hard to actually reach. I know on some level, right? To be in love, in the state of love, to be unconditionally loving and compassionate with ourselves and others. But it's already who we are. And the other stuff, the other parts of us are just kind of like shadowed clouds right over the sky of who we are. It's not real, it's just temporary, and we're just working through it, right? One step at a time. So that's what it looks like. It doesn't have to be this big event. And I feel like with spiritual awakening, we tend to think of it as like, oh, enlightenment is so hard to,
Yeah,
to
I woke
attain.
and then I walked through
Yeah.
the cloud in this forest. Then there was an elixir, and I took it. You know what I mean? Like this dreamscape. It really,
Exactly.
what I'm hearing from you
Yeah.
is once you have awareness, it's an ongoing process over time that
Yeah.
allows you to embrace who you are
Yeah.
and therefore show up in the world with more love and compassion towards others.
Yes, that is it. Yes, 100%. And I'm actually writing a book on this right now, which is, really around this concept of imperfect awakening. It's time to step into this knowing that it's already within us, it's here, and we just have to align with it. That's it. Right? We don't have to become perfect human beings because that's impossible and not at all necessary, for the awakening journey. And I find that as we're awakening, we're actually becoming more fully human. That's my experience through this. We're discovering more about what really lies at the heart of things for us, right? We're not running away from it, we're just with it, right? And that's the difference.
I love that you're
Yeah.
doing this book.
Oh, thank
Oh my
you.
gosh, that's just so exciting. What that does bring me to, because one of the things you
Yeah.
talked about is
Mhm.
giving the listeners this complimentary workbook.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I would love for you to talk about that because now people have gotten to this point in our
Yeah.
conversation and they're going, okay, what you guys are saying sounds great, and you're talking about this tracking, like
Yeah.
I can't just do this on my own out of nowhere. Like, what are you talking about?
What
So
is
this
this?
should help, right?
Oh, yes, absolutely. It's going to
Okay.
make a huge, huge impact in the journey. That's a great point. And, I'll just, go over a few tidbits about that pathway back to love process because it's not in the guidebook. And then I'll talk a little bit more about what is in the guidebook.
Sure.
Yes, what is that like and and how can you use this for your awakening? So the first thing to know just about, as we're looking at number one, right, spiritual awakening, So first thing to note, right, before we even dive any further into it, is that it's attainable, right? Just to keep noting that and keep coming back to that, because if we don't think of it that way, we're going to get stuck in our wounding, right, and get trapped in that. And so as we're looking at this first step, when we go inward for this pathway back to love process, it's about acknowledging. So again, right, acknowledging what's coming up for me. And then you're inviting it's almost like a beautiful white light to come into your body. And you can breathe in that light. You can allow the light to come in through your top of your head, whatever works, but you're allowing yourself to be filled with light, because it gets you out of the mind and it helps you tap into your body, and it helps you to remind yourself that you are light. You are love, right? No matter what's happening in that moment. So whatever triggers coming up, that's the first thing, right? Breathing, of course, and bringing in the light and this kind of acknowledgement. It's all happening at once, so to speak, right? In this first step, bringing in the light, coming inward, and just feeling, right, what's arising with light, of course, to help. Yes. And then step 2 here, which is very easy, is just to place your hand over your heart, only if it feels safe, of course, to do so, right? And to close your eyes. And from here, you're just feeling the emotions as they're arising. And you're just saying to yourself, this is only a wave in the ocean of who I am. Yeah, you're just feeling that out, and you're just letting your body just, allow the emotion to come, whether it's grief or anger or whatever it is, right? It could even be joy, right? Arising in that moment. We're just acknowledging, right? This is only a wave in the ocean of who I am. And then this next step is compassion for ourselves around what we're feeling. So let's just say it's grief, right? I know it's, around the holidays, and this can be coming up for a lot of people. And so you might even say, with your hand over your heart, I choose to love myself through this, right? I choose to love myself through this. And that is just an easy 3-step process, right? Bringing in the light, breathing with the light. Second step, this is only a wave in the ocean of who I am. And the third step, right, I choose to love myself through this. Right, and that's it. And from there, we can shift our triggers. We can shift the way we're feeling in the moment. And it only took maybe a minute, right? Or maybe a couple minutes, I'm not sure. But yeah, so that's it. That's the pathway back to love process.
Like, whoa. But it's amazing how when you're in that process,
Yeah,
how when you're so present. And I do think that so much of life in this fast-paced, busy, multitasking, multi-dimensional, overly sensitized world, and there's probably 15 other descriptors I could have used that are like synonyms for everything I just said.
Yep.
We don't create these moments with ourselves.
No.
Where we can just, I find, I don't know if anybody listening right now can relate to this, but I find this moment that you've described, that the only times in my days where I feel like I create that is when I'm taking a shower. Because phones, technologies, the computers, the doorbell, like, I don't know, all the things when I'm sitting at my desk, or just anywhere where distractions, even in your best attempts to be focused and block time and do the calendar and all of this, there's still just distractions going on, that we have to find a place. Maybe it's nature. Maybe it's outside. Maybe it's, getting away from all the possible things. For me, I feel like sometimes 10 minutes of my life, or 15 if I'm lucky. Or if it's a bath, it's longer. And then you actually can say something to yourself and feel what you're feeling and address it and embrace it.
Yes, absolutely. That's it. You're right. And you know what? You are, I would think, most people, right, in this situation, you're just like everyone else, right? I know I find myself there some days too, right? It's like the day goes by and there's just no time, right? And I've developed this way of just bringing quiet time to not quiet time, if that makes sense, right? So when there is a lot of chaos going on or a lot of changes happening, I just allow that to be. And I allow whatever I'm feeling to be. And I just sit with that, even if it's just a moment or two from there. And then the next moment, right, I'm more present and I'm more alive within myself, even if nothing else changed around me. Right, there's still loud noises, there's still things happening. I travel often, so there's a lot of, things to plan and to think about and to make happen. And so there's that element too, right? There's so many things that are happening in our lives. And I think a mistake sometimes we can get into is to think that our mindful practice too needs to be quiet, that we need to be in a quiet, safe, kind of sterile place where we can just be. Yes, that's absolutely necessary, for parts of our journey. However, life isn't always going to give you that. Someone's going to knock on the door, right?
Life is not quiet, people.
No, it's not quiet. It is not quiet. And your mindfulness practice you might have those great days, where everyone leaves you alone for a good 15 minutes and you just have that space to yourself. But I imagine if you're a parent, right? If you're a business owner, if you're working hard, oh my gosh, you are not going to have the time necessarily, right, to yourself in this way. And so I think it's so important for us to embrace the chaos that we have in our environment and to choose stillness within ourselves regardless, if that makes sense.
Oh my gosh, you're right. Because I've seen and have done at times, let's say you're working in a coffee shop.
Yeah.
Because just this whole thing of being alone is just not, you're not feeling it today.
Exactly.
So you go and you're socially distanced, obviously. You're doing all the protocols with your mask when you need to.
Yeah.
And so, yes, there are other people around you. There's things going on around you. There's noise, there's activities. But I've seen and had moments where I'll just take 60 seconds and just breathe and close my eyes. And yeah, there's all this stuff going on around. But it is stillness. You're choosing stillness.
Yeah.
In the midst of chaos and busyness, you're choosing stillness to take that minute. It's kind of like when my Apple Watch tells me to breathe.
It's something like that. Exactly. I love it.
I mean,
that's great.
the choice of doing it, and then there's a reminder to do it.
Yes.
Which I do love the encouragement, because if you're going to have technology, at least let it encourage you to take time.
Exactly. Let it be good technology, right? Exactly. Like to remind you to meditate and whatnot. I know I use my Fitbit, and I just set little alarms for myself throughout the day. And I will just, no matter what time it is, I'll just, I'll stop what I'm doing, as long as it's not an emergency, right? Of course. But, I'll stop what I'm doing and I will use that moment as a mindful moment. Right? As you mentioned, right? You take that deep breath or you get settled within your system. And I think those are actually the best moments to bring mindfulness, is when you hear your mind say, I don't have time for it, or I'm too busy right now, right? When you get that sense, or there's a pull in another direction, right? Within your mind or within your body, that's actually the best time to meditate, because that's real life. That's practice. Right. And that's when we grow the most, not when we're sitting on a meditation cushion, and just, having all this beautiful spaciousness and quiet around us. And I mean, that's a real treat. And I think it's important, to have that at some point too. But let's be real, right? Life is not that way. And if we're going to practice, we might as well practice in our everyday lives, right? And as best as we can, instead of waiting for things to change so that we can finally get mindful. Right?
Yeah, because I think that's that feels for many like too much to ask. Like, okay, I don't have time to walk to the forest and find a lake and sit by a tree. You know what I mean? It's kind of this whole picturesque thing where maybe at a retreat or once or twice a year, it feels that, picture. But I think the day to day is finding moments.
That's it. That's it. Exactly. Yes. Because over time, as you start to feel better through this, right. And whether better is just feeling like you have a deeper connection with yourself, right. Or better means, because better doesn't always mean symptom relief, right. Or that we stop feeling what we're feeling. And I think we get caught in that sometimes too. But better might be something like, I have a better understanding of myself now that I just sat with this meditation, right? And as we improve in that way, right, as we grow in that way, then it doesn't become a chore anymore. It's becomes even better than brushing your teeth, which you have to do every day, right? Or taking a shower and all these things that we just do on autopilot. And meditation becomes, more than just autopilot. It becomes like a desire, right? Something you want to do. I know, I start every day with meditation. I don't know what, some days, of course, things happen and I can't. But when I get up in the morning, it's the first thing I do. Right? I know life is going to take me over and I need to do at least a 20-minute meditation to ground out and feel ready for the day. And that's what I do every day. And I've talk about tracking, right? I've tracked how things have worked and realized I am just more aligned with my higher self when I take that time. And I know that
what does your 20 minutes look like? Is there a place that you go to do that and you feel the best set? What does that look like?
Yeah. Oh, that's such a good question. So I don't have a dedicated room. I think I'm a good example of somebody that doesn't have a dedicated space necessarily. I've got, dogs and we live in a really small space. So it's, we don't have this opportunity, or I don't have an opportunity to go into another room necessarily. So I have the same place I meditate. It's like a couch area, within a side of a room. And my pets are still nearby. I still have a lot of things going on in the room. And I just close my eyes and I sit in silence, and I set little timers sometimes too, just to remind me to stay present. And sometimes, I'll do a guided meditation too, if I feel I need it that day. But for the most part, I just listen to the sounds in the room. I feel the sense of spaciousness around me as I'm sitting. And if my dogs start to bark, or if they start making whining noises, which they do sometimes, or, if I hear things in the background, or if something, my body's telling me I'm hungry because it's first thing in the morning, I'm just paying attention to whatever's coming up, and I'm just feeling it. And if I notice, my dog in the background making a noise, and there's a part of me that says, well, I want it to be quiet right now, I notice that. I notice there's a part of me that wants things to be quiet so I can meditate. And so that's coming back home for me, to really feel it out and notice I'm none of these thoughts, I'm none of these emotions. They can help me, guide me through my day, but they're not who I am. That is so important. And then I feel more resilient as I go throughout the day. I feel like I'm seated within my true self, right? And so that is so important. And that's another way of using your environment, right? Is your meditation, that can make a big difference.
That's huge.
Yes.
Man, can you imagine trying that? And even like, well, Amie, you've been doing this for a while, so 20 minutes might sound like an eternity for someone that's like, I can't even sit still with myself for 4 seconds. Maybe, maybe it is trying something for 3 minutes.
That's it.
At first, right? Because I feel maybe that there's a little bit of a buildup that's needed to feel comfortable sitting with your thoughts and feelings for a little bit longer of a time. So it can be incremental too.
Yes, absolutely. And I would say you have to trust yourself through this process, right? Because you don't want to push it, especially if you've been through trauma. And so starting off, with even a 3-minute meditation is something that's so valuable. Oh my goodness. It can make such a big impact in how you feel. And then moving up, maybe the next week it's a 5-minute meditation. Maybe the next week it's 7, and the next week it's 10. And, research shows that 15 to 20 minutes of meditation a day, can make a huge impact in our mood and how we feel as a whole in our body, and, improve our relationships and help us to feel more in tune, right? And of course, more grounded, more resilient. So it doesn't have to be very long. And I know 15 to 20 minutes, you're right, it does sound like an eternity when you're starting out, but eventually it gets a lot easier. And I'll be honest, some days 20 minutes is hard, because my mind's telling me there's so much to do, or I have to focus on things, and my mind will say, oh, no, we don't have time for that, right? We have way too much.
Well, it's crazy though, because we'll have time for like 5 episodes of something on Netflix, and that takes like hours. So
exactly, right? It's like I have no time in my schedule for such things.
It's 1/4 of an episode of whatever. So
exactly, that's so true. Perspective. I love it. That is it all the way. Yes, I know we have to have perspective, because you're right. It's not about not having enough time. It's about what are we doing with our time. Where are we placing our priorities? And that's, and I'll remind, I do this work with myself, and I'll tap into that part of me and say, I get it. We do have a lot on our plate today. Totally 100% on board with that. And this is going to help us get through that day.
Yes.
This is it.
The acceleration.
Yes.
And being able to achieve expansiveness and joy.
Exactly.
Oh, I love that. That process is just gold. I think that may be a part that people repeat a couple of times in this episode. Just replay that because it's so short, but so effective.
It's so important. Yes, absolutely. And I know you had mentioned, the guidebook and what that looks like for people. So so I'll come back to that piece. I know it's very exciting. So basically, one thing we haven't really talked about, so I'll dive into this a little bit in the guidebook. I go, about my journey in there. So I talk about what I've gone through, which you've already, listened to at this point. But there's a lot of great information around your spiritual awakening journey and what that looks like. So there's phases of spiritual awakening. For example, we all start off, right, in what I call dream sleep. Now, this is where we are kind of on autopilot in our everyday lives, right? We're just moving through life, kind of just like, in a haze, in a dreamlike state. Life's happening to us, if that makes sense. We're not doing, anything to exert any kind of sense of influence in our everyday lives. So that's what dream sleep looks like. And that's the unconscious state of humanity, right? Where we're in the state of what happened today, right? Like your head hits the pillow at night and you look back on the day and you're wondering, what happened? Where am I in this? And so then there's, another phase. So I'll just kind of, go through these phases briefly, but of course it's more in depth in the guidebook itself. But the second phase is getting in touch with this understanding that we go through a dark night of the soul, typically as human beings, right? Or dark nights of the soul. So many different difficult situations. This could be trauma related, grief and loss, could be times where we are transitioning in our lives in some way or another. And we're in this kind of existential crisis of what does this mean for me and who am I in this? And these phases aren't necessarily linear. In fact, you don't go from dream sleep to dark night of the soul. However, that's can be common for some people. And then phase 3, we're moving into this kind of lucid dreaming state is what I call it. And for those of you who don't know what lucid dreaming is, it's essentially you're just, when you're in bed at night, you go to sleep, you are able to know you're dreaming while you're dreaming. It's just awareness that you're dreaming, right? When you're sleeping, which is really cool.
Oh, I had a dream. I think I had a dream. Like it's not, there's
Yes.
not a connection to it.
Exactly. And that's exactly, the kind of like the sleepy, phase 1, right, of our consciousness. And when we move up to phase 3, now we're in this lucid dreaming, which means we are exerting power in our lives. We are making change happen. We are more connected to our higher self. We're more attuned with love and peace and joy. Now we're still in seeker mode though, right? Because in a lucid dreaming state, we're still trying to figure out, who are we in this, right? Who am I? What's my life purpose? What am I doing here, right? What is all this really about? So we're really trying to get a clear sense of ourselves in this phase. But this is when we're more likely to reach out for help, right? We're more likely to get out there and find somebody who can work with us. And then we move into phase 4, which is, now things are waking up. You're waking up, so to speak. Now you're it's like when you wake up in the morning, you open the curtains and the sun shines in. It's that kind of feeling, right? And so what that can feel like for people is this knowing that, number one, I'm not alone. We're all connected as human beings in this way. And we start to have a really clear sense of what this is all about, right? Which is love, and like a clear sense within us. Now, this doesn't mean that you're not, pulled by different subpersonalities or that you're, in this perfect awakened state, but it's more of you're having these moments of peace and calm for no reason at all, right? You're having these moments of joy for no reason at all, right? And then we move into Awaken living, which is phase 5. And this is where we're looking at the world and we're saying, you know what? I am fully aligned. I'm fully aligned with who I am. And this is that level, that level of spiritual awakening. We're at that point where we can say we're in tune. Right? We are, we're in an understanding of how are we guiding our lives? How are we moving through our lives? And from here, we're moving through it with a sense of love and peace. So, in that example, I was giving earlier about these different parts of us and how they show up in this way. And sometimes, they'll, like, an inner critic will show up, or the part of you that says, hey, I need to, do work instead of meditate, whatever that is, right? So there's lots of different ways these parts show up. But in phase 5, you're leading with love, always, right? So that's what that looks like, as you mentioned earlier, right? I want to be there. I want to have that feeling. And we're all heading there. Yeah, we're going to go through different phases as we go along here. And then phase 6 is more of an integration. So this is where, we don't have as many parts showing up in the way that they do now, which, is typically, like this kind of drawn in feeling that you tend to get, right? When a part of you shows up and you feel so like addicted to that, right? For example, a part says, oh yeah, you have to send this text right now. You have to send this email right now, right? Or you have to do this right now. That's not there in phase 6, right? You don't have these kind of intense like emotions coming up in this way. Everything's more integrated. Doesn't mean you're not feeling things, but it's not in the same way because you've asserted yourself as this kind of leader in your system, so to speak. So that's in the guidebook, right? And some more information about what that looks like and how to navigate that. And then there's a journal to go into everything you need for tracking and building self-awareness around your patterning. So it's a lot. It's a lot of goodies in there. Yeah.
Wow. And so people can see that.
Yes, they can see that. Absolutely. They can see that.
That's way too much goodness in one moment.
Thank you.
I have this link to this guidebook that you are going to get. So all you have to do is look at my show notes. They're there every week for every episode. So you know where to find them. And go to the link because this is a true gift. I can't even tell you enough, Amie. I mean, this is like gold.
Oh,
this could be the start for some on this journey to so much more. It's like a door. You basically provided perhaps a door that either wasn't there or was there but hasn't been open for a while.
Yes.
So people may have walked into the door and then decided they were going to close it and go in a different way. And now we're just reminding ourselves either that this is available or that it's there to frequent so we can become integrated.
Oh, yes.
Can you imagine what a world would look like with this full integration everywhere?
Oh my gosh.
I can't even
I know.
like process that right now.
I'm with you. I'm with you. Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So that is a gift. This is, if you've gotten this far in the episode, you are the lucky one because you don't want to miss that. So you can go to that link. But Amie, I want to just ask you a couple questions to get to know you because that's always important to me. And the first question is, what are 3 words that best describe you?
Oh, I love that. So 3 words that best describe me. The first thing that comes to mind is compassionate. The second thing that comes to mind is adventurous, always seeking adventure in new ways. And the third thing that comes to mind is present moment focused, I'll say. So it's just what I really aspire to every day. It's like every time I notice if my mind's elsewhere, I'm like pulling it back, as often as possible. Yeah.
Yes. Oh, those are so good and accurate. I love that.
Oh, thank you.
Okay.
Yes.
Next question. What is something that you are working on improving?
Oh, I love that too. What I'm working on improving is actually what I've been talking about, really, is just deepening that integration, I'll say, in my own process. I have a coaching program, and so I provide tools and resources, for my students to go through this, this very in-depth tracking. And with that, I've been doing it myself and then giving it to them, right? And I'm trying it myself.
Be a student, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's how you learn to be more powerful with what you teach.
Exactly. And so I'm doing it and I'm trying it out and I'm saying what's working, what's not working, right? What are some obstacles? What are some, and of course, getting their feedback too. But as I'm doing this, things that come up for me become the new information for my program, right? Because I'm like, oh, this is something that popped up, right? This part of me, right, is in need of something. So, for example, a huge piece of the work I do is healing the inner child. And that's something that I'm doing on an ongoing basis, every single day of my life. And I would say that's what I'm really, working towards, because this inner child, right? For example, one day she's 100% healed and she's happy and, good to go. And there can be times, right, where a situation can come up and all of a sudden, right, boom, you're triggered. Like I'll give you an example, of what came up for me. And I was going to a coffee shop, come to think of it. I was going to a coffee shop. I was in a great mood. I was like, oh, yes, I'm feeling really good. I go to this coffee shop, and as soon as I get there, I'm 15 minutes before they close. And the owner walks out. You can tell he's had a really bad day. He's carrying the trash out, and he's in a bad mood. And he says, I'm closing early. He's very abrupt, very angry. And he says, I'm short staffed. Bye. And walks out. Right. And I'm just like, whoa, like a little taken back and a little shocked, what just happened? Had to kind of sort through that and checked in with my inner child right after that experience. And my inner child was saying things like, well, he was so mean. Why was he so mean? Because, it talks in that small voice, right? Of people are mean, or why would somebody do that? Or, I'm hurt by this, right? And it's these little hurts, though. They add up over time, right? And they become big hurts. And so what I'll do is I'll sit with that little girl and I'll place my hand on my heart. I'll do that pathway back to love process. And number one is always to align with her, right? That little girl within me, and to say, I'm here for you. You're not alone in this. And it's okay to feel hurt right now. And I can't even begin to tell you how quick things changed for me in that moment. Within just a few minutes, I was right back to the way I was. I could have dwelled on it all day. How dare he say that, right? Or whatever it is, right? How dare he act that way? And that kind of thing. And those different parts, those angry parts can show up. But in that moment, I decided, how do I want to lead with love right now? And do I want to connect with my inner child in this way so that we can lead with love, right? So we don't have to feel so hurt in this process. So yes, that's what I'm working on. Yeah.
Such a good example. Oh, that's so good. I love that.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay. My next question is, what's a self-limiting belief that you've had to overcome?
Oh, self-limiting belief. You know what? The biggest one, I did mention it earlier, but it's the one that just haunted me for so long. I can't handle this was my self-limiting belief. It was literally like killing me in the worst of ways. Like, I can't handle this. I would hear, I can't take anymore. Some variation of that on some level. I can't take anymore. It's too much. I can't handle it, right? Were some of the ones that I would say to myself. And or the thoughts that would pop into my mind and I would believe them, to be honest, right? That's kind of how it happened. And I just don't believe that anymore. I just don't, it just doesn't make any sense to me. As soon as, I hear those thoughts, or I hear people, say that, and I'll say, I know what that's like, because I believe that. But on some level, now that I've been through the hardships, I would remind that part of me that said, oh, I can't do anymore. I'd remind that part, we're really resilient. We've made it really, really far in our emotional and spiritual growth. And it's okay, that things aren't perfect. And it's okay to fall down and to move through these phases, right, of spiritual awakening, because we're not going to be perfect. We're not going to just end up in one place and all of a sudden bliss is like our only experience, right? We're human.
You can go from, I can't handle this, to, I can handle this.
I can handle this. That's it.
Can't do that.
Exactly.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's really good.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
What is one thing that you want to see changed in the world?
Oh, I love this question. Thank you for bringing this up. You pinpointed it earlier. I want to see change in the world, that we are living as love, the love that we are, and leading as love, right? As you had mentioned earlier, right? It's like this, can you imagine what the world would look like? Can you imagine what it would look like, right? If we were integrated, not fragmented, right? And really feeling whole within ourselves. And it doesn't mean we don't have sub-personalities, by the way, right? When we're moving into integration, it just means that we are understanding that we are not those, and that we are leading as love in our everyday lives. And that's what it means to me. And if we see more of that, oh my gosh, I don't even know what the world's going to look like, but I know it's going to be like heaven on earth, I think, on the deepest level. So I'm really, yeah.
I stack my hand
Yeah.
on that. I really do.
Let's
I
do
really do.
it.
I honest, like, I just want everyone to go ahead and put your hand in, do it virtually. You could put it in our hand circle.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
That's exactly it. And that would change everything. That would change
I,
everything, right?
I believe that.
Yeah,
I do.
absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
What is one of the best pieces of advice that you've ever been given?
Oh gosh, what is one of the best pieces of advice I've ever been given? I would say, quite simply, let go. Just don't hold on. Let go. That's it. And you know what? I want to say where I originally got that from. I don't know 100% because I've followed so many spiritual teachers. I know Michael Singer has been, a mentor around, the surrender way of doing things. He's an author on the surrender experiment. And what was his other one? The really popular one. Oh, the Untethered Soul. There we go. Untethered Soul was another book of his. But his whole message is about letting go and surrendering. And I'd say the best advice I've ever gotten. So simple, but just let it go, right? Just surrender to it.
Yeah. Yes, Amie. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. I'm totally gonna take that in. I'm taking that in because I just think it's such a important reminder.
Yes, it
Too.
is. Absolutely.
Okay, now this is the most important question of the whole interview.
Awesome. Ready for it. Let's do it.
Which is, where can people find you? Because now at this point, they're like, she's talking about this. She has a coaching program.
Yeah.
There could be things that people either
Yeah.
just want to
Yeah.
see that you're doing or potentially tap in even further into what you're doing. So they need to know where to find you for that.
Yes, really good point. Yes. So I do. So my website is so it's one-awakening.com. So you can find me there. And online, I'm also on Facebook. I have it's called Awakening Spiritually Together, is the Facebook group that I run. And I actually have live trainings on there, meditations I do. So it's a beautiful community where if you want to join and just, start to move towards, this level of integration in your own life, that would be an excellent place to meet and to join others who are on the same path. So you're not alone. I'm also on YouTube as well. So I would say those are the main places where I'm spending most time. Oh, and Insight Timer, actually. That's a meditation app for those who are brand new to meditation. I actually highly suggest it. It's a free meditation download on the App Store. And from there, yeah, you can, check me out. I'll be there live. And I also have meditations on there as well. So there's a lot of places. Yeah, great question.
That is way too cool.
Yes. Thank you.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I can't tell you how much I learned today. I feel like I just went to a class and it was as much for me as every person listening. So I'm really grateful. And that guidebook is really a gift, Amie. I couldn't tell you enough. This is such an important time. Always, this is important for us to think about and to work on. I do think it's an ongoing thing. It's not just this one day event.
Yes.
And especially as we think about, we're going into a new year soon, I would just offer for people to take the time for you.
Yes. Oh my gosh, that's it. Take the time for you. If any message, right? That's it. Take it. Because if you take the time for you, then you can build self-awareness. You can track. You can get in touch with your highest self. And honestly, that's where it begins. Without that, without time and space for ourselves, we never get that opportunity.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Well, this has been incredible. I just want to thank you so much for giving so much of your time today to this conversation.
Oh, it was so
It
much
means
fun.
a great deal. So thank you for your time. And I'm excited to see everything that you're doing.
Thank you so much. This is wonderful. I really appreciate it. This is just, an amazing experience to not only connect with everybody here, but just to deepen the understanding that we are all spiritually awakening and it is the right time, right? For each and every one of us to move forward on this journey, and that you're not alone. I think is the big takeaway message too in all this.
Exactly. Oh, you are not alone. Remember that.
Yes.
Well, I certainly will be keeping in touch with you. And probably as I go through the journal, may even just email you and just share some of my experience with you.
Please do. Yes, I would love to see that. Yes, I'm all ears. So please do send me what you're discovering, what's coming up for you. And yeah, we can see what happens next on this journey.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Amie.
You're so welcome. Thank you. I really appreciate this.
It was awesome to have Amie Dean on the show, and the gifts that my guests are giving are awesome. Millen Levis giving the financial guide that we talked about before, Amie Dean coming on and giving this amazing guidebook. I am in a state of complete gratitude. Gratitude right now. So let me tell you about this guidebook. As I said, the link is in the show notes. Go to, if you're like, what's the link already? Just what is it? www.oneawakening.us/born-unbreakable. Okay. If you're wanting to know what it is and you feel like typing that all out, you don't have to. Go to the show notes, see the guidebook. You will see all the 6 phases that Amie talked about and the journaling prompts to begin to understand and become more self-aware. I'm telling you, if there's nothing else that you get from this episode, it is the importance of self-awareness, and that it is an ongoing process. We have to continue to stay in a state of being aware of who we are, what we're feeling, what we're thinking, so we can give the best of ourselves. When we can create that synergy of love and acceptance and compassion for ourselves, what we emanate is different. The vibration and the energy that you give to the world changes when you treat yourself with love and compassion. I promise you that. I am on this journey with you. I was just telling Amie after the interview, one of the greatest gifts with this podcast is that I am on the learning journey with you. This is called Born Unbreakable because I continuously need to remind myself, like you need to continuously remind yourself, that you are born unbreakable. But we don't always remember that. There are moments and experiences and triggers, like Amie talked about today, that come up. And we need to be in a constant state of awakening and learning so we can be reminded about how unbreakable we are. I really hope that you learned a lot. I really am asking you for you to take the action of using this journal so that you can grow and learn and be connected and more integrated. Imagine if we all got to the state of step 6 of integration. That would be magnificent. It really would. If you haven't subscribed to my show already, please click that subscribe button or that follow button. It means the world to me. Share this episode with somebody who can use that awakening and that growth. It is the season. We are approaching a new year, and now is the time for us to take control of our lives, our joy, our happiness, and our expansiveness. So do me that favor. Remember, you are your only limit, so take action today. Tune in again next time for another inspiring episode of the Born Unbreakable podcast.